Good job we had that reading then, isn't it? Psalm 65. Because we're celebrating harvest and we're looking at God's overflowing generosity. I don't want to talk about Italian ice cream and the portions you get on an Italian cone compared to an English cone. I've used that story too many times, but that's what it reminds me of. It's that overflowing of God's ice cream on the cone of our lives that just drips down the sides. God is generous. He's not stingy. He's generous and he's not stingy. He's generous in his provision, he's generous in his forgiveness, he's generous in his love, he's generous in his grace. In fact, he's too generous. His generous is exaggerated. He's generous to a fault, as we say. And there's a reason for that. He actually gives us more than we need. His generosity overflows. And we'll look at the reasons for that in a moment. But just let's pick out some of the key words from Psalm 65. He enriches the land and he waters it abundantly. He drenches its furrows. He crowns the year with bounty, and his carts overflow with abundance, or they drip with fat, as some versions say. The grasslands of the desert overflow. He is no man's debtor. The reason today that we're celebrating his goodness is that sometimes we just need to be reminded of the basic things of God. And the issue isn't whether God is willing to give to us. The issue is whether we're willing, you and I are willing to receive. That's the issue. And that's where the rub comes. Elsewhere in the Bible, we get phrases like this: where sin increased, where evil increased, where wickedness increased, and we felt as if we were out of control, grace increased all the more. It was more than sufficient to cover all the sin of the world. We are saved by his death, Paul says, but how much more shall we be saved by his life? If he did not spare his own son, how will he not graciously give us in him all things? We are blessed with every spiritual blessing in Christ. My cup overflows, David says. Going back to Paul, he says he has lavished his mercy on us. In other words, we can't contain it. He's super abundant in his mercy to us. He's able to do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. God will meet all our needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. We could go on, but I don't want to. But hopefully we've got the message. He is a generous and giving and abundant God. And we just stop and we say, wow, which is a great theological response to all of this. Just stand amazed at the goodness of God. One time when Paul was writing some stuff to the Romans, he got to a point where he got so excited spiritually, the only thing he could say was, oh, the goodness, the power, the grace of God. And it's one of those moments where we stop and we say, oh, thank you. Thank you, Lord, for your great generosity. So I think really what we need to do, what I need to do, and I think what we need to do is to change the way we think. It's called a paradigm shift. A fundamental change in the way we view God and the way that we view life and the way that we view God's generosity. So what about this business of God being wasteful? Why is he so generous? Why doesn't he just give us what we need rather than more than what we need? Why doesn't he just fill our cup rather than overflowing our cup? Why does he do that? Well, he's motivated by love for us, but also he's motivated by love for others through us. Part of his plan is to meet the needs of others through his generous overflow in our lives. Now, this is where the rub comes. This is where it's challenging for us. But his call is for us, therefore, to be generous with our time, with our resources, with our money, with our prayers, with our forgiveness. So if you have received from God, that's a tremendous privilege. But with that privilege comes the responsibility of sharing that with others. Now, we can do this in a very spontaneous way through everyday life, wherever we are, whether we're in a supermarket, whether we're on the street corner, whether we're waiting for a bus, wherever we are, we can spontaneously show acts of kindness to those around us. And that's the way it should be because of who we are as God's people. But also we can do it intentionally, a bit like what we're doing today. This is intentional. We had notice of this harvest service for a few weeks, and we can give intentionally. We bring a bag of stuff, of food products. We've got the special offering plates in front of you, and it's not for any special reason, just that they're in front of you. In front of you, Steve, no pressure, it's just that they're in front of you. So that we can just intentionally give if we want to give money or checks or cash. So we can do it intentionally. And we need to do both. We need to be spontaneous in our everyday life and lifestyle, but also we need to be intentional in our financial giving, in our time for prayer, in helping others, in praying for others. You know me well enough now to know that I'm not a particularly political animal. But I'm going to say some things that might offend people from whatever political persuasion. Fasten your seatbelts. No, don't fasten your seatbelts. I'm not going to say anything particularly outrageous, okay? But they are part of the political scene, I suppose, and the political conversation. I don't know whether you saw on the TV the other week the Earthshot programme that was headed by Prince William, part of the Royal Foundation. Did you see that? Just wait if you did see it. I don't know about you, but I found it truly inspirational. Now, God wasn't mentioned, and it wasn't a religious, spiritual, well, I think it was spiritual, but it certainly wasn't a religious kind of production or celebration. But it was spiritual in the sense that we are talking about not a moonshot, as in JF Kennedy's moonshot approach, but as Prince William is saying, we need to save our planet before we can think about going to the moon or any other planet. And 5 prizes were given of £1 million each to further the projects that won the Earthshot prize. And this will continue for a decade. Apparently by 2030, if we haven't got our act together by then, we just say our prayers and go. That's not being a religious fanatic or a kind of ancient prophet of doom approach. This is what scientists are saying. This is what politicians are saying. Are they not? We're following the conversation, aren't we, through the media and so on, that if we don't do something soon, we ain't going to be here for much longer. We might be here for a bit, but our children and our grandchildren will certainly perhaps be living in a very, very different world. The main reason I chose today as our harvest day is because it coincides with the start of COP26 in Glasgow later on today. It's the Conference of Parties, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. 26 because it's the 26th conference. Last one being in Paris, I think it was 5 years ago. And I just want to make some sweeping statements, if I may. And this is not a political speech or anything like that. And it's not question time either, because you might say, hang on a minute, what have you just said? Is that right? But if you do want to check stuff with me afterwards, if you can get them before I run off, you can do. I believe, based on what we know, based on what scientists say and the scientific community say, that there are more than enough resources to sustain life on planet Earth, even with 7.753 billion people on it. That's nearly 8 billion people. We have more than enough resources. We have. So we have to then say, well, what are the issues then? Why are we suffering? Why are the panic stations? Why are we, you know, on the edge of the cliff? Why do people go without if we've got more than enough? Part of that Earthshot prize giving a few weeks ago, one of them was to do with food wastage, if you remember it, and the city of Milan in northern Italy got the prize for what it does to help collect food from supermarkets, food that's going to be wasted, and distribute it to the poor of the city. You remember that one? As part of that project, what came out was this. Now, just listen very, very carefully to this, because every time I read it, it hits me over and over and over again. We waste 1/3, 33% of all food production. We waste it. Another thing to consider, the average family with children wastes £60 a month in food disposal. That's £2 a day. That's £700 a year. That's just waste. Now, I believe, we should believe, and we do believe, that what is happening in the city of Milan can happen everywhere. Can't it? It can happen everywhere. Today, we are supporting affordable foods. And it's great to have Nikki and Dwayne with us, Mr. and Mrs. And I'm going to invite them to come up in a moment, a bit later, just to say a few words, actually. And so that we can actually see them and see what they do, learn a little bit more about what you do. But affordable foods and food bank in the city are two dots that can be under the radar for many people and for local government and national government. Food bank perhaps less so, it's kind of getting up there, isn't it? I think our job is to make sure that these dots become more, and then strategically that they join together so that some sort of concerted effort on the scale of Milan that we can have in Stoke-on-Trent, that we can have in every city, so that we can harvest the resources that God has given to us in an intentional way so we can help those who need it. So it's a call on local government, it's a call on national government to do this. So what are the issues then? If this is not happening, what are the issues? If we do have the resources, I'm just going to say to us and articulate what we all think and what we all know and what we're all aware of. And that is that it's greed and selfishness, it's apathy, it's the lack of political will, the lack of personal involvement that means that people go hungry. Simple as that. And if I think about it very, very carefully, I'm just talking about it now in terms of John Alessi, me. Okay. If I took one holiday less a year and saved, say for the sake of argument, £2,000, just for the sake of argument, which I can afford to do, and I was to give that money to somebody like, or a body like Affordable Foods, what difference would that make? Now, if more and more people did stuff like that, if it came from the bottom up, wouldn't it be wonderful? it's got to come from the top down too, hasn't it? It's not like just from the bottom up. It's got to come from the bottom up and it's got to come from the top down. It's got to work at every level. This generosity stuff, when we talk about it in terms of God's love and God's grace and God's abundance and so on, this is where the rub comes. Because God then says, you've received, you give. Freely you have received, freely give. If you have received forgiveness, dispense forgiveness. If you've got money, there's nothing wrong with being rich and being wealthy. The issue is, the richer you are, the wealthier you are, the greater the responsibility you have and we have to give to those who've got less than us. That's not a political statement. Well, it is, but it's supremely a spiritual statement. Paul says, if you've got money, great. Just means you've got a bigger responsibility to give. Isn't it? That's the way that God expects us to think and to act. One of the things I really wanted to have a rant and a rave about, I'm going to have a rant and a rave about, but actually in the budget it was put right. But I'm still going to mention it. Okay, and this is to do with the government annual aid budget. Okay, so it just went by the by, but my antennae was up on this one, and yours might have been as well. We used to give 0.7 of our national income, 0.7 of 1% of our national income to the annual aid budget overseas. It went down to 0.5% because of the pressures of the pandemic and the stuff that we're going through. Now, the difference between 0.5% and 0.7%, yes, I know it's 0.2%, but in money terms, it's £4 billion. It's a lot of money. In the budget, if you notice, this will be restored back to 0.7% within the lifetime of this Parliament. Thank God for that. So we're talking about what can be done from the top down. With the COP26 starting today in Glasgow, let's pray that some of that together, that spirit of togetherness, that conversation that takes place will turn into what our Queen calls action. She says, I'm sick of the talking. You remember that bit that she was caught on camera, you know, the little private conversation that's become global news. She was saying, I wish they'd do something. I think she's probably expressing what we all think. Let's do something. Let's hope and pray that all that hot air and all that kind of talking turns into action and something is done to reverse what's going on in all the negative stuff that's going on in our planet. But let me get back to the bottom-up stuff, okay? Because it's ever so easy, and I love it too, to sit in my armchair and criticise government and criticise the UN and criticise whoever I'm criticising. And I suppose that's part of being part of a democracy, isn't it? Really. But the challenge really should come down to us, to me, to you, locally, individually, from the bottom up. What are we doing? What are we doing? Now, I find it really interesting and amusing, I'm not sure that's the right word, fascinating, that a lot of this stuff that we're talking about now is mainstream, isn't it? Remember when it was like weirdos used to talk about this sort of stuff? Remember when the Green Party was seen as like the green aliens from outer space? I can remember, I don't know whether you ever remember meeting your first vegetarian. I was in the 70s, I was working in the rates office in Lonsdale Chambers in Stoke. So it was mid-70s, and this chap said, we were going out for lunch, he said, I'm a vegetarian, and I kind of took a step backwards, almost as if he had the virus. It sounded really weird 50 years ago. It's not weird now, is it? And you remember the hippies? You remember? I nearly joined the kibbutz and went to Israel as a 18, 19-year-old. I was so idealistic and wanted to do stuff like, I don't think I was using phrases like save the planet or whatever, but you know, the commune of living together and sharing together and having a more equal society. I was all for that. I don't think it was politically motivated. I think it was a spiritual ache actually within me for justice and fairness in the world. And I can remember, you know, talking about the hippies and so on, and people thought they were really weird. Maybe they were, but isn't it strange that a lot of the emphasis and a lot of the themes of the hippie movement is now mainstream? Don't you find that really weird? Those of us of a certain age, do you remember all that stuff in the 60s and 70s? We're talking about it now as if like this is what we should be doing. Really weird, isn't it? God has given us the resources, he's given us the creativity, he's given us the ingenuity to sustain life and thrive and flourish on planet Earth. Have governments got the will to do stuff? Well, we'll wait and see. Let's hope and pray that they do. From our perspective today, have we, as a community of God's people at St. Paul's, got the will to do stuff? Have I, as an individual, got the will? I'm not saying give up a holiday. That might be a bit too much too soon for a lot of us. But what could we give up that could help others? How much more can we give than we're giving? I'm not really sure, and this is a shame on me, that I've ever given sacrificially, financially. I think I've given in so many different ways and so on and so forth, but whenever I've given, I've always had money left over, if you know what I mean. Maybe there's a call from God on us just to give a little bit more, just to learn what it is to enter into that generosity of God that we so love and so celebrate, that needs to be converted into our generosity towards others. So, affordable foods, it's in Hollybush. We've been supporting Nikki and Dwayne there for a number of years, and we're ever so happy again today to give this food here, the envelopes there. This envelope here from church. We want to donate £250 from church, and maybe a bit more down the road as well. So, Nikki, would you like to come? I don't know whether Dwayne, you want to come as well, or yeah? Can we give them a round of applause as they do come? Can I first?
Absolutely.
That's you with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all that you do. Please don't assume that we know everything that goes on.
Okay.
So if you're happy, just
yeah.
kind of talk about what you do, what's going on. Yeah, just a little as much as you feel happy with.
Yeah.
How do you follow that though?
Yeah.
You know, it's like following the Beatles, isn't it? Coming on after you on stage.
You can be the fifth.
Thank you.
So, affordable food, Stoke. I've been here before. Some of you were here last time. Oh, sorry. You're just used to keeping them on now, aren't you? So, affordable food, Stoke has been around for 4 years. And Affordable Food Stoke was born from a very simple trip, our shopping trip to Aldi. And it was one particular Friday evening. We were doing our shop, and a shop assistant was wandering around the aisles with a trolley that she was filling with very random items. And we followed her for quite some time, and we had the conversation of, I wonder what's she doing? This trolley was piled high. And so I questioned her. I tapped her on the shoulder and I said, I've got to ask you, what's this? You don't deliver. What's all this food? She said, oh, it's all going in the bin. I said, sorry? She said, it's all going in the bin. It's all out of date. Big sacks of potatoes, big bags of carrots, boxes of mushrooms.
Breads, cakes,
so,
really good stuff.
So I said, well, potatoes. How are they out of date? Says that the date on that packet is today's date. It's out of date. I said that. I was horrified. That's rubbish. They're not out of date. There's nothing wrong with this food. I'd got potatoes in my trolley, so I said, well, I will switch. I will put my potatoes back and I will stop them. No, she wouldn't have it. I went home furious and sad, annoyed. And we got together and we said, right, there's a problem here. And that was the very first time we'd realised, looked at food waste. And I think we can all be a bit naive where food waste is concerned. So we got our heads together and we looked at how much of this was actually going on. This was at one trip to Aldi one Friday evening, and this great big trolley of food was going in the bin. Did that happen every night? Did all supermarkets do this? Yes, they do. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. We contacted many supermarkets and said, okay, we need to do something about this. What can we do? Is two people. What can we do? Can we rescue that? No, it's all bad. It's all bad. You can't have it. It's all going in the bin. So we set about changing something. So we set affordable foods up. And we got in contact with lots and lots and lots and lots of people to see what the level of food waste was. And it wasn't just about the fresh waste at supermarkets. It wasn't just about the fruits and the vegetables. If a packet of cornflakes had a dent in the cardboard box, that would go in the bin. If a tin of beans had a ripped label, that would go in the bin. And it turns out there's lots and lots of people out there that intercept this, and they buy it off the supermarkets and different places, factories. So we approached them and we were able to buy food from them. So we were doing our little bit to stop all this food going to landfill. However, we still hadn't cracked the supermarkets. This was bigger organisations. As time went on, we got approached by a co-op who said, we've got 3 loaves of bread that have got today's date on them. Is there someone that you could give them away to? Fantastic, yes. Don't throw them in the bin. We will have those 3 loaves of bread because there are families out there that need a loaf of bread. That's where it started, 3 loaves of bread. With a little basket, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
That
in your own kitchen, you've got those that with your fruit and veg. It's a small thing, 3 layers.
Yeah.
That's it. That's how we started with one of them. That's all.
And the odd supermarket would come to us and say, "Oh, this bag of apples. It's got 1 bad apple in there. We've got to throw that away. Do you want the other 6 good apples?" Yes, we do. And it grew and grew and grew. To the point now where we collect from a lot of supermarkets. We collect everything. If they offer it to us, we will take it. The imperfect fruits, the wonky carrots, you know, the net of oranges that's got, don't all nets of oranges have 1 bad orange? They always do, don't I? think they put that one in there, but anyway, you've got 6 good oranges in there. Just because there's 1 bad one, you don't throw 6 good ones away. So it's now huge. We have phone calls every day from supermarkets everywhere.
Not just supermarkets now, you know, Costa as well. They've started contacting us.
Costa Coffee, yeah.
Their sandwiches. So we just wanted the conversation out there.
It's got to stop.
Stoke. Yeah.
This food waste had to stop. We had one particular conversation with a supermarket, which we won't name, but their policy, once their stuff goes in the skip outside, is to pour bleach on it. And that is to completely spoil the food so that no one can collect it out of the bin. And we got in talking to the manager of that, the store manager of that supermarket. And we had the conversation where, how bad is it that you've got to go in that bin in the first place? You know, to pour bleach on it, it's just inhumane. It shouldn't happen. And he took it upon himself to not do that. The food still went in the waste skip, But at a certain time of an evening, he pulled a security man in and left the gate ajar. And certain individuals knew that, I say it was a safe place, but they knew that they could get the remnants out of that bin. And that manager had an understanding with these people. If they made a mess, if they caused problems, the gate would be locked and he would have to go to store protocol. And that, for me, he was doing his bit. He was trying to do something. Could he have lost his job? Yeah, he absolutely could have done. But he saw it was criminal to do what they were doing. So we've managed to get these conversations going throughout the city. And our free section now is an area of the shop, quite a large area of the shop now, I'll be very honest, where anything that is donated to us will go from the supermarkets, will go on this section. And anybody can access that, absolutely everybody. We don't want a form filled in. We don't want to know if you're poor, if you've got no job, if you're rich. If you can use this food, you use it. We say to people, before you do your supermarket shop, come to us, come and see what we have. Because we have everything. What did we have yesterday?
We had 3 crates of carrots, 1 of potatoes, apples, oranges, pears, pomegranates, mangoes,
cabbages, onions, celery,
yeah.
courgettes.
Yeah, a lot.
So much so that we couldn't fit it in our shop. We've got a little cafe area outside of our shop. We had to put all the tables together and we displayed it for everybody there. And people come by the droves, and rightly so. And sometimes we get criticised, that should go to the homeless people, that should go to only those that need it. And we disagree with that. If we only allowed those people to have it, there's every possibility half of that would go in the bin. We want everybody to have it. If you can use it, we want you to come and take it. If you've got a lobby, a stew, whatever planned for that evening, come and get the vegetables for us, because they would have gone in the bin. And
it's not just about feeding the poor, it's about reducing food waste, and that's what that is. So yeah, that's what we're interested in.
Yeah,
they both go hand in hand, we think. You know, they're both vitally and equally as important as one another. So
however, we do have a greater need in our free section. The free section, like we said, anybody can come and help themselves. These wonderful donations from you, where do they go? So we do have people in our community that are far less fortunate than us, for many, many different reasons. Some is through choice, through poor decision making. Some are through the pandemic has hit everybody hard, losing the jobs, benefit changes, so many reasons why people have no food. So a couple of years ago now, we decided that we needed to do more than give out the free food. There was a greater need. So we started our own food bank. And again, that was very, very small. That was mainly us, wasn't it? That a family would come to us and say, I'm really struggling, is there anything that you can do? And we would go out and we would buy a bag of shopping and we would hand it over to the family. Very often, no questions asked, we would just do that. The need for that got greater, so we then devised a form, didn't we? Yeah. That people can come to us and say, can you help? We're not asking for people to lie stories. It's hard enough asking for help anyway. So we just ask a few basic questions. And how can we help you further? We are able to provide each family that comes to us with a food parcel that will last them 4 days. The cost of that food parcel is £7.60. And I almost feel bad handing this 4 days of food over, because 4 days isn't very long. And then the problem's going to come back again. So we try and intervene from the very beginning. So if someone comes to us and says, I've lost my job, I'm not getting any benefits for 6 weeks, we say, okay, that's fine. and we then make provisions for that amount of time. We don't want that person having to feel like they've got to come to us cap in hand every 5 days, you know. So we put a plan in place and we say, right, okay, let's work together. And the amount of people when we do that will say to us, as soon as I get a job, as soon as I get a first pay, I will give you something back. And 9 times out of 10 they do. People are very, very grateful. And that's what that goes to. We have a lot of families with more than 2 children.
Yeah.
We're seeing 4, 5 children families at the minute that have been affected in many ways. We've just seen that the government has stopped the £20 a week from universal credits, which was temporary, but families, everything's gone up in that time. So families have needed that £20. So they stopped the £20 a week. And then suddenly their gas and electricity has gone up by £100 a month. So suddenly they are really struggling. We saw levels of struggle 18 months ago. Now we're really seeing levels of struggle. Before all this, families did have a tin of beans in the cupboard and they did have a loaf of bread. Now we see families that have got nothing, that are coming to us begging us. We had a family just last weekend who didn't realise that we usually need 24 hours notice to get this done. It's a big operation. And she literally came to the door and said, I filled a form in 10 minutes ago. Can you help me? And I was like, oh, it was really busy. There was only me in there. I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And we got chatting. And when I looked at this young lady, she was all skin and bones, wasn't she? She was skin and bones. And she cried. She was desperate. She was starving. She was stood in front of me, starving. And I'm going to make her go away in 24 hours, come back in 24 hours. So we quickly went around as much as we could and sent her over the food parcel, in very mini food parcel, to come back the next day when we could sort something better for her. And that's what we're seeing. And us as a couple, as a family, I think we've been naive at the struggles of other people, of families. And it's hard enough struggling. And then to have to go to somebody else and say, can you help me? That's really, really hard. You'd be surprised how hard that is. So we try to be very, very welcoming.
Yeah.
Everybody gets greeted with a smile. We don't care of your circumstances. We don't care if there's a dependency there on other substances. We know that you've got children, you need feeding. Them children need feeding. And so we'll be there to help and signpost to other agencies, other charities that can help in ways that we can't. But we are just the faces of affordable food. We're just the two that are there. Well, Dwayne's not actually affordable foods, to be fair.
No, I'm not.
He just jumps on the bandwagon. He's got his own job. It's me that's his affordable foods. I'm there all the time. Dwayne does a lot of the back office stuff. He does my paperwork and anything you see on the computer side, he does that because I'm rubbish at that. And we're just there to help everybody, absolutely everybody. But we're just the faces. It's you. It's you that's provided this today. It's you guys that are feeding those families. We're just literally handing that parcel over.
We've just got access to them. We know where they are. But without you guys and your support, we couldn't do what we do.
So it's you that needs the thanks, and we do thank you. And your families thank you as well. You know, you don't get to see that bit. You don't get to see the looks on their faces.
And the tears.
When we hand these over, you know. So from us and from them to you guys, thank you very, very much. And if you, sometimes we talk about helping and how we can help, and not everybody's fortunate enough to be able to provide an extra bag of shopping. Is there a family in your street that you see the children a little bit weathered? You know, could you ask a question? Could you go to them? Could you say to them, are you okay? You know, I've made a stew. Would you like a bowl? We could all do that, you know, and we encourage that. And it's funny because the amount of people that come to our free section and we'll get a bag full of shopping. We get fed ever such a lot. People come in with cakes for us and soups and stews, and that's their way of thanking us, you know, to give us something of what they've made. And we encourage that. I know COVID has made that very, very difficult, and people are very, very wary. But
I'm double jabbed, I'll eat it.
It was everything. But yeah, there is always that little bit more we could do, and sometimes it's just about looking a bit closer at those that are around us, because not everyone's as fortunate as us, and people hide it very, very well. You know, so if there is something that you can do, sometimes it's just saying, "Are you okay?" That's all you've got to do. Are you okay?
I think in
Get into a
terms of
conversation.
these food parcels, I think you spoke about giving up, say, a £2,000 holiday a year, and you could do more. Well, it's not about giving up something. You could buy one extra tin at your shopping, just one extra tin, one packet, one jar. That's all it takes, one. And then over the course of time, they add up.
Yeah.
And then we've got a bag of shopping. You know, it's just one tin every time you go shopping, one extra 40 pence.
And not throwing your own stuff away, you know, making soups and stews and passing that on, you know, passing it on.
It's a lost skill.
Don't throw it away. Before the pandemic, we had a guy involved with us, one of our trustees, who is a chef and predominantly about food waste. He throws nothing away. We were going to bring him into the centre and do a course on, and then COVID said no. COVID said you can't do that. So we're hoping that that will come pretty soon, and it'll just be very, very basic. The things that are spoiling, you know, your carrot that's a bit limp, and your tomato that's got a few eyes, and just teaching people that these things don't have to be thrown away. What we can do with them, we can make delicious, nutritious food out of next to nothing, and it stops it going in the bin. So from us to you, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
You know, thank you.
Thank you.